Hello everyone, my name is Vishnu and I'm support escalation engineer here at Microsoft. I'm partnering the session with my peer Mohit. Today we are going to discuss about retention and compliance concepts. This session contains overview of retention and compliance scenarios and troubleshooting issues. Let's get started. So the agenda for today will be MRM. What is MRM? Managing records, messaging records management, how MRM interacts with MFA and how MFA is dependent on the different types of holds that we have. We'll talk about what are sensitivity labels, how is it different from the retention policies. We'll also talk in brief about eDiscovery and the content search. So what are retention policies and why are they important? So in Exchange Online, we talk about unlimited archiving or we talk about 100 GB of mailboxes for an enterprise plan. So what does that mean? Are we going to allow users to utilize a complete storage that is provided to them, or are we going to allow the users to keep using the archiving solution and allow the mailbox to bloat up? How are we going to maintain their mailboxes in case if for any compliance reason or in case if we need to maintain the hygiene of the mailboxes? That is when the retention policies comes into picture, and we'll talk more about that in the later slides. And retention policies are also linked with or it is dependent on archive mailboxes, litigations, in-place holds, and we'll also see how the single item retention go hand on hand with the retention policies and MRM. So what is a policy? Policies are nothing but combination of tags. A single retention policy can have either a single tag associated with it or multiple tags associated with it. And any user will be assigned the policies which will have all the tags associated with it. So can I reuse the same tag with multiple policies? Yes, I can use a single tag and associate that tag with multiple policies. But when we talk about Exchange Admin Center, creating a retention policy in our Exchange Admin Center, users cannot be assigned with more than one retention policy. We'll see how it is different when we talk about creating policies in Security and Compliance Center in the later slides. So multiple tags added to a policy. This policy is in turn assigned to a user, and retention actions acts accordingly on the respective mailbox depending upon the tags that is present on the policy. So what are tags? As we discussed, a single policy can have multiple tags and a given tag can be added to multiple policies. A policy can be applied to more than one mailboxes. A mailbox can have only one policy applied. When do we think we need to have multiple policies? So say, for example, if you want to give some leverage to your executive persons in your organization and allow them to utilize their mailboxes for a longer period or to retain their email items for a longer period, you can create tags accordingly for those users and create a separate policy and assign those policies to the executives. Or for your end users, you can create more restrictive policies to make sure the mailboxes do not go beyond a certain limit. And depending upon what your organization requirement is, you can create tags and assign those policies to the respective users. So what are the different types of tags that are available? So we mainly have three tags: the default policy tag, also known as DPTs, RPTs, retention policy tags, and the personal tags. And these are just a representation of how you differentiate the different tags. When you go to the GUI in Exchange Admin Center, the tag defines if it is a default or if it is an RPT or if it is a personal tag. These are RPTs, these are personal, which you allow users to manage their own content on their mailboxes. Default tags, RPTs, and personal. And if you look at the retention action, we also see something called as archive and delete. So these are actions that are available on the tags that you create. We can also name them as archive tag and a delete tag. And what are the folders for retention tags? If you go to the GUI in Exchange Admin Center, These are the default folders that you can create tags directly from the GUI. But if you want to customize certain tags, or if you want to have a customized policy for to manage your dumpster or to manage a different folder in your mailbox, you can always create them manually using the PowerShell commandlet new-retention policy tag, where the type specify what type of tag that you're creating. This is an example that I've created for the task explicitly. And if you look in here, you can see a type recoverable items. This is mainly for your managing your dumpster items. So basically to differentiate if we can create or we can manage the policy, or we can create policies and tags using a GUI and PowerShell, and what are the different options that are available in PowerShell, which is not visible in your GUI. Hybrid coexistence. So it is highly recommended to maintain the same policies across your organization in a coexistence scenario, so that when a mailbox is migrated over, or when you have a remote archive, the same policies apply. And if in case if you have a different policies, there are chances where as soon as you migrate your mailboxes, the content might get deleted depending upon the policy which is in cloud. So how do we do it? We have scripts for doing it. You can export the XML file from your on-premises using the export retention tags.ps1, and you can import them to the cloud using the import retention tags to maintain consistent policies across your organization. And different scenarios, which we already talked about, when you have policies across if you have a multi-forest section in your organization, you can have same policies replicated over across each forest. And in a coexistence scenario, your on-premises and your cloud also should have the same policies. And in case of remote archiving, it is highly recommended to have the same policies across the organization where the mailbox resides, where your primary mailbox and your archive resides. So this hyperlink will be provided to you as a handout, which will have this information of how to export and import this policies across organizations. Okay, now we talked about policies and tags. Let's see how what is MFA and how is MFA processing the mailbox, and we'll also see how is MFA dependent on the different types of holes that we have. What is MFA? MFA is nothing but the managed folder assistant. This is the component which is responsible for processing the mailboxes in any environment and to see what actions it should take. So whenever the MFA processes the mailbox, it will understand what action should it do with the respective items depending upon the policies and tags that are defined for that particular mailbox. Now, how frequently the MFA runs in an Exchange Online environment? It runs once in every 7 days. And if you want to force MFA to process a mailbox, we can always use a start manage folder assistant PowerShell commandlet, which will trigger the MFA to process the respective mailbox. But that doesn't mean that it's going to process the mailbox immediately as soon as you run the PowerShell commandlet. It will be prioritized, and depending upon the resources available, MFA will pick up that mailbox and process it. Okay, now we'll see how MFA is going to react or act when you have a mailbox kept on a retention hold. So retention hold is nothing but you are placing a mailbox on hold, which means you are informing MFA that do not process this specific mailbox because of XYZ reason. Either the user is not available in office, on a vacation, or an extended OOF, and you want to keep the email items intact until the user is back in office and decides what he needs to do with a specific mailbox. And once the user is back in office, you can always remove the retention hold, and you can allow the MFA to act on the specific mailbox whenever the MFA processes the mailbox the next time. Now, how do you do it? If you want to do it on a mailbox level, you need to run the set-mailbox commandlet, and either you can turn the attribute retention hold enabled to true or ELC processing disabled to true. If either of these attributes is set to true, it is going to inform MFA this mailbox is not to be processed for XYZ reasons, and MFA will skip this mailboxes when it is trying to process it. Now, can I do it for an organization wide instead of doing an mail per user? Yes. Set-organization config with the attribute ELC processing disable. If you enable this attribute in the organization config to true, MFA will not process any of these mailboxes. So when do we need to do it? In case if you are trying to create policies for any testing purpose and you unfortunately apply them to the active production users, and then you later realize the actions that you define on the policies is going to delete the content which you want to avoid, you can go ahead and enable this on the organization wide and take the corrective actions, revert the changes that you made unknowingly. And once you make sure everything is back in place, you can go ahead and set this attribute to true so that the MFA will start processing the mailbox the next time it runs on the specific users. Okay, before we look into different types of holes, litigation or in-place holes, we'll first talk about the different types of dumpster folders that are available, and we'll see what folders comes into picture when we have a specific mailbox on a hold. So first one is deletions, which is nothing but your deleted items folder and the recoverable items folder. The users have access to restore the email items themselves until the items are preserved in this specific folder. Next one is purges. Purges are folders which will come into play when you have a mailbox and litigation hold. Next one is discovery holes. Discovery holes is a folder which comes into play when you have a mailbox on an in-place hold. Audits, it preserves the auditing logs when a mailbox is enabled for the auditing. Calendar logging, it maintains the calendar processing information for a specific mailbox. So the life cycle of an email, soft deleted email goes to the deleted items. From the deleted, it goes to recoverable items until which user will have access to restore it. Post which it will move on to either of these folders depending upon the hold that is available. If there is no hold available, that is when the single item retention comes into play. Depending upon the age limit that is set on the single item retention, once that age is expired or once the expiry date is met for those items, the email is permanently deleted. Okay, now let's first differentiate what is a litigation hold and in-place hold. When a mailbox is placed in a litigation hold, it means the entire mailbox is kept on hold. And when a mailbox is defined or when a mailbox is set to be on an in-place hold, it is when we define a search criteria. Depending on that search criteria, the items are retained on the mailboxes on which the in-place holds are applied. So very basic difference. The entire mailbox is on hold when it is a litigation hold, and only specific emails which matches the search criteria are kept on hold when we have the mailbox on an in-place hold. So without an in-place hold, yes, MFA is intended to delete all the items. With having a mailbox on a litigation hold, we tend to preserve the items and inform MFA not to delete those items, which is matching those age criteria. Now, having a mailbox on litigation hold doesn't mean that it does not allow the users to delete the emails in their mailboxes. No, users will continue to have access to delete emails from the mailboxes. But when it comes into picture is when the emails move into the dumpster folders. When an email is deleted, once it moves out from the dumpster, the deletions folder, the first folder that we saw in the previous slide, once it moves out from that folder, it goes and sits into the purges folder on your dumpster items. From this point onwards, end users do not have access to those content, but an admin can still go ahead and restore this content at any given point in time if the emails are retained or if the mail items are still in that litigation hold duration. So when you place a mailbox in litigation hold, you have an option to define how long do you want to preserve those items. You can define as unlimited, or if you define as any X number of days. After that X number of days is met, when the MFA processes the mailbox, it identifies these items are set to expire at this point in time, and it will delete those items from the purges folder. Versioning folder is nothing but it retains a copy of the original modification that is happening on a respective items when a mailbox is on any kind of hold, be it an in place, be it a litigation, or be it a organization level holds. And yeah, purchase and versions are emptied. Either the litigation hold is removed or the items are expired, which means the retention age for that items are met. Now, how is it different in place hold? These are the concepts that came with the introduction of 2013 servers, and it is based on a search phrase criteria, and the same things applies. It will be preserved in the discovery holds folder, and it will be there until either the in place hold is removed or the retention age for that specific hold is expired. So we talked about expiration. So how does the retention age is calculated, or on what basis, or how is it different when a mail item is in your top of information store, and how is it different when the mail items are on your deleted items folder? We'll just see that now. So when a mailbox is on when email item is in your inbox, the expiry date is calculated either the delivery date, which is also called as the start date of that particular email, plus the retention age. So whatever the retention age is specified on the specific folder, be it 10 days, be it an year, be it a 30 days. So that will be plus that specific X number of days until which the email is expected to be retained. So the delivery date plus the expiry date or the retention age will be calculated for your expiry date. Now, how is it different on different folders? So the first part, you can see the delivery date is for the date of creation, which is also the start date or the delivery date of this particular emails. When it comes to calendars, a non-recurring calendar item expires according to the end date. Recurring after the last occurrence. Recurring calendar with no end date will not expire. Same thing for task. And if the items are corrupted, MFA will not be able to process those items. We need to manually intervene to see what actions can be taken on those such items. Now we'll see how it is different when it comes to the deleted items folder. So how is the retention age that is calculated when the email items are in deleted items? If an email item is moved from a different folder to the deleted items folder, and if it does not inherit a tag from the parent folder, the start date will be calculated as per the date on which the email is moved into the deleted items folder. If the item is inheriting a tag from the parent folder, the start date will remain the same, which will be the actual start date or the actual delivery date of that email. And depending upon the retention age that is defined on the deleted items, it will process those items. We'll see a few examples. So in this example, we have an inbox tag of 365 days delete, and we also have a deleted items tag of 30 days. So how it calculates, the email is received or the start date of the delivery date of that particular email is on 26th of January 2020. The expiry date is stamped as 2021. The 1 year delete action take place until the email is on your inbox folder. No changes on this scenario. The email gets deleted on after 365 days. Now, moving further, I'll be talking about deleted on so and so date. That doesn't mean that on the exact date the email will be deleted. It all depends on when is MFA processing that specific mailbox. Say, for example, on this scenario, we talk about the email will be deleted on the 27th of January. Need not be the same, because on 26 or on 25 on the 25th, the MFA would have processed the mailbox, and it will be processing the mailbox after 7 days. So depending on that logic, so whenever the MFA processes a specific mailbox, it identifies what are the items that needs to be retained and what are the items that are expired, and that is when the emails will get deleted. This is another example where the inbox tag is of 365 days and the deleted items folder have a tag of 30 days. Now the email is deleted from the inbox folder to the deleted items folder on the same day. So when an email is on your inbox folder, the expiry date was 365 days. But as soon as the email moves to your deleted items folder, you can see the expiry date is calculated from the start date of that particular email, which is 26th of January plus 30 days, because the retention age is 30 days and the email is deleted after 30 days. It's not going to wait for that 365 days. It is going to be deleted after 30 days. A scenario where we do not have any inbox tag, we just have the deleted items folder tag. So in this scenario, it is not going to inherit any tag or any action on for the specific email from the parent folder. In that scenarios, whatever the date the email is getting delivered into your deleted items folder or getting moved into your deleted items folder, that will be your start date for the specific email. And 30 days from then, the email gets deleted. So very simple logic. If the email is inheriting from a different folder, which has a different action or different tag specified, the start date is going to remain the same on whatever the actual start date of that particular email is. And depending upon the retention age set on the deleted items folder, it will calculate if it is met the age criteria or not. If it is met, it deletes immediately, no matter what the initial tag or expiration date for that email was. If it is not inheriting any tag, the start date of the particular email will be the start date on which the email is moved into the deleted items folder. And from there, the retention age applies, and the start date plus the retention age will be the deletion date of that or the expiry date of that particular email. And just reiterating, these dates doesn't mean it's going to get deleted on the exact day. So MFA, whenever the MFA processes, whenever the MFA was successfully able to process the mailbox, that is when the email will be deleted depending upon the actions. Okay. We talked about tags and what it can do. Now we'll talk about what happens if you try to disable a tag, and what happens if you try to remove a tag from the policy, and what happens if you try to delete a tag from the policy. So first scenario, we'll talk what happens if you disable a tag from the policy. So the policy is existing and the tag is still existing in your Active Directory. We are just setting the expiry date to never, which is also referenced as disabling a tag. In this scenario, when the MFA is processing the mailbox, the next time after the action has been taken, after the changes has been made, MFA understands this tag on which the email was tagged with is in a disabled state, and it will not take any action even if the items are expired. So what happens if you remove a tag from the policy? So and whenever the MFA processes the mailbox, understand the tags are removed from the policy, but it'll continue to action specified on the specific tag which was removed, which means if an item was set to expire on so and so date, even if you remove the policy, these items are already tagged by that retention tag, which is still available in your Active Directory. So MFA will continue to process the mailbox and remove the specific item from that mailbox if it is expired. What happens if you delete a tag from the policy? So when the MFA runs the next time, it will understand the tag on with which the items are tagged is no longer available in the organization. It will recalculate or it will reprocess the complete mailbox depending upon the current tags which are available on the organization, and it will take actions according to the new tags which is available. Which means if you delete a tag, what are items which are expired, which you expect the MFA to remove it, it's not going to happen. It will reprocess those items and it will take actions depending upon the new actions that has been specified with the available tags. Okay, we'll see what are the principles of retention. So two terms, retention and deletion. The basic difference is retention is how long you want to retain the items, and delete is when you want to actually delete the items. So what is the difference or which takes precedence? The retention always takes precedence over deletion, which means the item might be deleted, the item will be deleted from your mailbox, but it will be retained until the retention age for the specific mailbox is met. Now, if I have multiple policies that is assigned to a mailbox, which I said cannot be done in an Exchange Admin Center, but once we move on to the Security and Compliance Center, you'll know how that works. So just an brief how it takes precedence. If you have multiple policies with different actions of retention, the longest retention age that will be honored, and the email items will be preserved until the age is met for policies which has a highest retention age. Now, explicit over wins over implicit, which is nothing but your personal tax will be taken precedence over the default applied tax. And the shortest deletion wins. Again, if you have multiple policies with different delete actions, whichever policy or whichever tags has the shortest deletion period, that will take precedence and the email will be deleted on that specific age, but will be retained until the longest retention age is met. We'll see a couple of troubleshooting scenarios. So whenever a mailbox is processed by MFA, the configuration file, IPM configuration.mrm, this is a file which will have the complete information about what policies are applied, what are the different tags available in them, and when to action on the specific items. The tag will be present for both your primary and the archive mailbox. So to look into this configuration file, we will need to make use of the MFC mappy tool, where you will be logging into your top of information store, the associated constant tables on your inbox. And if you sort it using the message class on that pop-out that you get, you will see the ipm.configuration.mrm. This will be the same when you look into the archive mailbox as well. Now, I've displayed two attributes here. What these basically means is this is a roaming XML stream file which will have the information about all the policies and all the tags that are available or that are being applied on the specific mailbox. You will tend to look into this one in case if you have made any changes to your policy and if the actions are not happening depending upon the policy that you have created, you can look into this file and see if the changes that has been made in your organization or for the specific mailbox has been processed by the MFA and applied on the specific mailbox. If this do not reflect the recent changes or the modifications which you have made, which means MFA was not able to successfully process that mailbox due to XYZ reason, and it is still taking the old policy or the old tags and it is acting upon the actions that was defined on the previous tags that were applied. So few examples on what are the properties that we'll be looking into when you want to identify what policies or what tags are applied on a folder. Archive tag. If you go in, look into the archive tab, you'll identify what is the archive period when it is expected to expire or when it is expected to be archived, and what is the tag applied to it. Same goes with the delete tag. It will give you the retention period when it is expected to be deleted, and what are the policy tag applied to it. Same thing goes for messages. The same will be having a start date and the end date for that specific emails that you're looking for, specific emails, and it will give you when it will be archiving and when it will be deleting the specific email from that policy from that mailbox. Now, how do you identify if a mailbox has been processed by MFA? You can use the export mailbox diagnostic logs. There are two components involved, which we'll talk. The first one will be your extended properties. So when you run this commandlet, export mailbox diagnostic logs for a specific mailbox with extended properties, it is going to list you all the information that happened when MFA tried to process the mailbox during the last attempt. This XML will be huge. If you want to short it down, you can use this PowerShell commandlets, which will give you the attributes which actually MFA is trying to do and what actions has been taken during the last time the MFA tried to process a specific mailbox. I've included these attributes in the later coming slides just to give you a gist of what this is going to do. Total processing time, it is nothing but how long the MFA took to process the mailbox when it successfully ran on the mailbox, and how long the ELC tag sub assistant took to tag the items for the specific mailbox depending upon the tags that are available for that policy, and updated folder count, number of folders that were updated by MFA in the last run. So again, as I said, this is just a brief of what these attributes are, which will give you an idea on what you need to be looking into when you're troubleshooting cases where MFA or the MRM is not processing the mailbox, which you expect to do in a specific way. Just moving on with these attributes. I'll just pause it so you can just look into this. So last run success timestamp will give you the timestamp when the MFA was successfully able to complete the processing of the mailbox. Okay, so while troubleshooting, you can also use this commandlet export mailbox diagnostic logs with the component name as MRM. So you're trying to get the diagnostic reports of what happened on a specific mailbox when the MFA was processing a mailbox. So these are certain exceptions that you can see when you run this commandlet. Basically, can give you a idea of what could possibly be wrong when the MFA was trying to process it. The first in resource unhealthy exception is a common thing which you might see whenever you try to run this commandlet. This normally happens if the mailbox is huge in size and if the MFA was not able to complete the task within the given time. This doesn't mean the mailbox is having a specific issue. When the MFA processes the mailbox next time, it's going to correct itself, or you can always go ahead and trigger MFA to process a mailbox without waiting for the next 7 days. I just have included a couple of more examples which could possibly give you the reasons what could be the possible reason why the MFA was unable to complete the processing of the respective mailboxes. Just looking back in Exchange Online, in Exchange Admin Center, we have retention policies and retention tags, also known as MRM records, with deletion and archive actions that can be defined. And these are the certain PowerShell commandlets that you can keep handy to look into what is the retention policy that is applied for a specific mailbox. If you want to get the information about the complete policy, you can use the retention policy pipe FL. If you want the complete description about a retention tag, retention policy tag pipe FL, and the diagnostic logs that you can make use of when you have issues in MRM not getting processed on a specific mailbox. And if you want to understand what are the items in the mailbox and what are the age, if you want to discern it, including the oldest and newest items, it will get you the information sorted out accordingly as well. These are the policies that we have in Exchange Admin Center. We just went through and see how it is, how it behaves or how it acts when the policies are created from the Exchange Admin Center. Now Mohit will take you through how is it different or what are the additional information that we have when we create policies in the Security and Compliance Center.
Thank you, Vishnu. Hello, everyone. Till now, we have talked about retention policy, retention tags, and how MRM works. Now we would be taking you through the retention labels and sensitivity labels, which is available in Security and Compliance Center, and which is majorly used for compliance and auditing purpose. When we talk about managing content, it requires two actions: retaining, meaning to retain the content, and deleting, meaning deleting a content after the retention period. With these two retention action, you can configure retention setting based on your requirement. For instance, retain only, retaining content forever for a specified period of time. Delete only, meaning delete content after a specified period of time. Retain and then delete, meaning retaining the content for a specified period of time and then deleting it. To achieve the above outcome, we have retention compliance policy. Retention compliance policy is used to define the workload and users in that workload to which retention is applied. It also contains the retention tag, which is a combination of retention compliance rule based on which the content is identified to put on hold and the action to be taken on the preserved content. Retention compliance policy can be applied to all workloads: Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, Yammer, and Office 365 groups. For SharePoint and OneDrive side, the copy is retained in preservation hold library. For Exchange mailboxes, the copy is retained in recoverable item folders. For Teams and Yammer messages, the copy is retained in a hidden folder named substrate hold, which is a subfolder in Exchange recoverable item folder. Moving on. In the next slide, we would be talking about the policies and the rules which is available or which is a part of retention compliance policy. The retention compliance policy will define the location of the data that the associated rules will or will not fire against. It will also define the workloads that the user has selected to apply the retention to. It will also define whether or not preservation lock is enabled for the policy, which is that will make the policy immutable and unable to be changed. So you can create a retention policy and add a preservation lock to that particular policy. When you add a preservation lock to a policy, the retention policy cannot be changed. Whenever you are applying preservation lock, it is always recommended you verify the policy is working fine as per your expectation and then apply the preservation lock. When it comes to retention compliance rule, the rule will define the workload that it applies to and will define the query if one is present, as well as the retention action, duration, and the duration type. If you are using a E5 license, then you are opened up to some additional query based features. So if you are using a E5 license, you also have additional query based features. With E5 license, you can deploy retention based on either sensitivity types, which is the DLP sensitivity types, or query editor, which is similar to available in content search. If there are labels associated with the rule, you will see some published compliance tag associated with the rules. Whenever you are working both with retention label and retention tags available in Exchange Admin Center, you should always keep in mind the principle of retention, which has already been discussed by Vishnu, which are retention wins over deletion, longest retention period wins, explicit inclusion wins over implicit inclusion, shortest deletion period wins. So for example, if you have some retention label created in Security and Compliance Center, and you also have some retention tags available in Exchange Admin Center, these retention principle would define which will take precedence. Retention setting and holds that you create with eDiscovery cases can both prevent data from being permanently deleted. They are designed for different scenarios. So you can achieve the goal of holding the data using eDiscovery cases as well. However, these both are designed for different scenarios. Retention settings that you specify in retention policy and retention label are designed for a long-term information governance strategy to retain or delete data for compliance requirement. However, holds for eDiscovery are designed for a limited duration to preserve data for a legal investigation. Retention label scope is usually broad, with the main focus being the location and content rather than individual user, whereas hold for eDiscovery scope is specific, with the focus being content owned by identified users. So when we talk about eDiscovery, it is scope to identified user. However, when we are talking about retention label, the main scope or the scope of retention label is to the location where the policy is being applied or to the broader audience. Moving on. In this slide, I have mentioned few commands which is available, which can give you the policy detail, retention compliance policy detail. Please note these commands are available in compliance PowerShell, not in Exchange PowerShell. So you have to connect your PowerShell to Compliance Center to get these commands. So the command is get-retention compliance policy, which will give you the distribution status of that particular policy. You can also run get-retention compliance policy distribution detail, and you can get the distribution status, last modified by, and the last status update time So using this, you can define whether the compliance policy that you have defined for your organization, whether that was successfully distributed against the workload or not. Moving on. In here, I have defined a PowerShell command which can help you to redistribute the policy. So for example, in earlier command, if you get any sort of error while processing the retention compliance policy, you can use the set-retention compliance policy, the name of the policy with retry distribution switch to redistribute the policy against the workloads to which this retention compliance policy has been applied. Moving on. Here you can also run get-mailbox with a pipefl switch, which will give you the in-place hold details about the mailbox. We can also run PowerShell command get-organization config pipefl to identify org-wide hold applied to the mailboxes. The in-place hold attribute can have different values depending on the type of hold applied. On the right hand side of the slide, I have mentioned the different type of hold which is available in Office 365. Starting with mailbox search hold, this will have a format of GUID with a symbol. Unified policy hold. These holds are managed from Security and Compliance Center and should only be applied at user level. They can be from either a case hold or a legacy unified policy, and it have a prefix UNIH. Unified retention hold. These policies and holds are managed from Security and Compliance Center and can be applied at user and organization level and have the format with a prefix GUID and the action, where prefix defines the type of workload the hold applied to. For example, MBX stand for mailbox, GRP stand for groups, and the action determines what policy does. For example, 1, 2, and 3. 1 which defines delete, 2 indicates keep, 3 means keep and delete. For example, if we take an instance of MBX 944, the GUID which is mentioned :2, here it defines the hold is being applied on the mailbox and has an action of 2, which means delete. The property of for organization wide hold, the hold ID will not be stamped on the organization config object, and you will not see that hold ID stamped on in place hold property of the user unless the user is excluded. So for example, if a user is excluded for an organization hold, you would see in get-mailbox with a minus symbol. So if any user is excluded from an organization hold, a minus symbol would be prefixed before the hold GUID. If the retention hold policy is applied explicitly to user, not all location, then you will see the hold stamped on the in-place hold attribute of the mailbox. Organization-wide hold exception is identified with the prefix negative, as we have already discussed. In get-mailbox command, we have also a parameter compliance tag hold applied. This property is set to true when there is one or more labels applied to mailbox with a keep action, including keep and delete. So there is a parameter in get-mailbox named compliance tag hold, which is set to true when there is an action of keep and delete is defined. Sometimes you also see that delay hold is applied to the mailbox. This indicates that a temporary delay has been set for the removal of a hold. When any hold is removed from a mailbox, this value is set to true to prevent the accidental purge of content that's no longer affected by the hold. When delay hold is set to true, the mailbox is still considered to be under a hold, and it's equivalent to litigation hold with unlimited duration. Currently, this system automatically attempts to remove the delay hold after 30 days. However, you can manually remove delay hold by running set-mailbox command with a switch remove delay hold. And for inactive mailbox, you have to add switch inactive mailbox. Moving on. Here we will talk about labels. Labels are the ability to manually classify specific items like a single email or document and apply a specific retention policy to the item as opposed to the tenant as a whole. For example, if a customer has 7-year retention policy on the tenant as a whole, but then wants to have sales contract live for 25 years or maybe credit card data live for 1 week, they have to label those particular content. Labels have the ability to preserve and retain data or do nothing at all, but just classify a document. So you can use labels to just classify a document. It is not necessary that you define an action. Labels will show up in workloads, which is existing retention policy tags do. So like retention policy tag exists, or you can see retention policy tag available to user mailboxes. In a similar way, labels are also available to users if they click on messages, right click on messages in OVA or Outlook. With retention label, you have the ability to define the start of retention period from when the content was labeled. This is a specific feature which comes with label, which you do not get with retention policies. That is, you can define the label or the start date of the content when the content is being labeled. Retention labels also supports record management for emails and document across Microsoft 365 apps and services. So you can also use labels for record management. You can use a retention label to mark item as a record. When this happens and the content remains in Microsoft 365, the label places further restriction on the content that might be needed for regulatory reasons. You can also specify a retention label as a condition in your DLP policies. Although the main purpose of retention label is to retain or delete content, you can also use retention label without turning on any retention or other action. As we have already discussed, you can use label only to classify the document. It is not required that you specify any action. You can also create one or more auto apply retention label policy, each with a single retention label. With this policy, a retention label is automatically applied when conditions that you specify in policies are met. In exchange, retention labels that you auto apply are applied only to messages newly sent. So if you are auto applying any exchange in exchange, if you are auto applying a retention label, it will be applied to only the new messages. It will not apply to the existing emails which is already there in the mailbox. Moving to the next slide. Here we have talked about the PowerShell command which you can use to get the details about the retention compliance rule. So as we have already discussed, retention compliance policy is a combination of retention compliance rule and retention compliance tag. So this is the PowerShell command that you can use to get the compliance rule which is being associated with a policy. And when you run this PowerShell command, get-retention compliance rule, it will give you the GUID of the compliance tag. You can make use of that GUID to get the details of the compliance tag. When you do get-compliance tag, the GUID of the compliance tag, and then you can get the details. What is the action defined? What is the retention type, meaning creation age in days, and retention duration? What is the duration till the time the content would be retained? In this slide, we have talked about the retention compliance policy. Like you have a PowerShell command to get the detail about the retention compliance policy. So you run get-retention compliance policy, and you can also use the distribution detail switch, which can specify whether this particular compliance policy is being applied to all the workloads to which you have sent this policy for. Moving on. So in this slide, as you can see, we have mentioned that in Outlook and OVA, if the user clicks on any email, they would be able to see the labels which is available to them. So these are the labels like one day delete, one week delete. So these are the labels which they can make use of. These are some set of PowerShell command that that is available with compliance, PowerShell compliance, security and compliance PowerShell, which you can make use of to get the details about the compliance policy, to create a new compliance policy, to get the details about the existing compliance policy, to make modification on the existing compliance policy. You can use set-retention compliance policy, and to remove an existing compliance policy, you can use the PowerShell command remove-retention compliance policy. In a similar way as for compliance policy, we also have PowerShell command for compliance rules. So new, get, set, remove. So these are the few commands which would be available for compliance rule, to create a new rule, to get the details of an existing compliance rule, to make modification to the existing compliance rule, and to remove the compliance rule. Similarly, we have compliance tags, the PowerShell command for compliance tags. So as I said, the compliance policy or the retention compliance policy is a combination of compliance rule and compliance tag. So for each component, we have rule PowerShell commands which is available. So in compliance tag also, you can make use of new -compliance tag to create a new compliance tag. To get the details of a compliance tag, you can use get-compliance tag. To set the or to make modification to the existing compliance tag which is available, you can make use of command set-compliance tag, and to remove, you can make use of remove-compliance tag. Moving on, when we are troubleshooting retention compliance policy, it is the troubleshooting remains similar to what we do in retention policy. So we make use of MFC MAPI to get the XML roaming file or the PR XML stream file, to get what all policies gets downloaded from the server to the clients, and what all policies and tags which is available to the client to process on that particular mailbox. So again, you have to go to IPM configuration.mrm tool or this particular folder and get the details of the XML stream. So this has already been discussed by Vishnu, so I'm moving forward. Now we'll talk about what is sensitivity labels. Sensitivity labels allow you to classify and protect content that is sensitive to your business, and it does so without hindering your people productivity and ability to collaborate. You can manage sensitivity label from Security and Compliance portal under Classification tab, Sensitivity Labels. Sensitivity label can be used to encrypt the content and watermark to the document and also can be used to prevent data loss. To protect content, we can make use of sensitivity label by defining the action. Sensitivity label protect content in different devices and platforms. So sensitivity label works on different devices and platforms. So if you are using Office application, so you can use sensitivity labels for Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and different other Office application. You can use sensitivity labels to protect sensitivity content from leaving your organization. So in case if you have any sensitivity information that is going out of your organization, you can prevent that by using sensitivity label. We can also extend sensitivity label to third-party apps. So sensitivity label can be integrated with third-party apps, as it works with MIP SDK, that is Microsoft Information Protection SDK, which can be integrated with third-party apps as well. We can make use of sensitivity label just to classify content without protection. So as we discussed for retention label in similar format, we can also use sensitivity label just to classify the content without adding any sort of protection. We also have an option to override and prioritize the sensitivity labels. So when you create sensitivity label, and if there are multiple sensitivity label which is available, you get an option to prioritize those sensitivity labels. And if there is a mandatory sensitivity label, you also get an option to override that particular sensitivity label. Sensitivity labels can also be auto applied. For this, you require E5 license. There is a point to note that sensitivity labels available in security and compliance are different than what is available in Azure. We can migrate sensitivity label from Azure to security and compliance, but these two are different and their workings are different. To make use of sensitivity labels, we have clients available, which is used by the application. So there are different types of clients which is available and is used by the application to process the sensitivity labels. For example, Unified Labeling Client. It is a platform that provides support for labels across products and platform through MIP SDK, that is Microsoft Information Protection SDK. So Unified Labeling Client is a client which is available as an add-in in Outlook or other Office apps, which make use of Microsoft Information Protection SDK to process the sensitivity label. In a similar way, we also have built-in labeling client where we enable the classification. Labeling protection client, that is CLP, which is built into the product and it does not require a additional add-in. So built-in labeling client is also available to the application that does not look like a add-in. It is integrated with the application, but it does not look like a add-in. Labels can be distinguished into different types depending on how they are created or how they are applied or where they are applied. Okay, so if you see in the slide, I have defined the type of labeling method. Okay, so to start with, there is a manual labeling where the administrator create a sensitivity label and provide it to the end user, and end user can manually label the content that they want. Second is auto labeling. So when administrator creates sensitivity label, they get this option where they can define whether this label should be auto labeled to the document or the content. The next one is recommended labeling. So recommended labeling is it is a option when administrator create a sensitivity label, they get an option where they can define that label as a recommended label based on the criteria. So for example, if you define a particular sensitivity label as a recommended label based on certain criteria, if the document contain that particular keyword in that particular document or email, it will give a mail tip to a user to automatically apply that particular label. Then we have mandatory labeling. In similar way as recommended labeling, in mandatory labeling, you define a criteria where a sensitivity label will automatically applied to a document when there is a match on that particular criteria. And then we have container label, which is applicable to the Office 365 groups. Like retention compliance labels, sensitivity labels can also be applied to all workloads, including Office 365 groups. However, to use sensitivity labels with Office 365 groups, you need to enable the Microsoft Information Protection label for Office 365 group. So we have a document how you can enable sensitivity label to be used with groups. We will post that with this presentation. Moving on. Here we'll talk about how we create sensitivity label, what are the permission required, what a sensitivity label can do. To make use of Microsoft Information Protection, first you have to create and configure the sensitivity label that you want to make available for apps or other services. Then you create one or more label and policies that contain the label and policy setting that you configure. It's the label policy that publishes the label and setting for your chosen user and location. So to publish the label to the users or the workloads, you have to create or you have to publish the labels, and that is done by creating a label policy. And the permission which is required to do so is you can be a global administrator to achieve this action or to create a sensitivity label and publish it. Or you can add members to compliance data administrator, compliance administrator, or security administrator role group. Sensitivity labels provide us the ability to of encryption using an Azure Information Protection Service. We can assign permission who can access the content while creating the label. We can also use sensitivity labels to remove encryption from an existing document which has RMS encryption. It also let user assign permission when they apply label to any content. So while creating sensitivity label, you get an option where you can directly assign permission while creating the sensitivity label, or you can let the user define to whom the labels are published to assign the permission while assigning the sensitivity label to the content. We can also define the content expiry date. For example, if we are sending any document to someone, we can define till what time that content will be accessible. Sensitivity label also provide features of allow and deny offline access. So you can also decide whether whenever you are sending content outside your organization, you can define whether that particular content should be allowed for offline access or not. We can also make use of double key encryption with sensitivity labels. You can use two keys to secure your most sensitivity document. You can manage one key in Azure RMS and the other key in the double key encryption service. The key that you manage in double key encryption service is inaccessible to Microsoft. This makes the document more protective, or if you have a sensitivity document that is more sensitive to your organization, you can make use of this particular feature. We can also make use of content marking option available in sensitivity label, where we can add watermark to the document or header and footer to the document. Auto labeling is also a feature which is available with sensitivity labels. That is, it will automatically apply the sensitivity label to all the document based on certain condition that you define. We can create multiple sensitivity label, and priority of label is defined from top to the bottom. So if you go to Security and Compliance Center and if you go to sensitivity label, if you have multiple labels that is being created for your organization, the priority of that particular sensitivity label is defined from top to bottom. Same applies to the sensitivity policies if you have multiple policies. Once the labels are created, you need to publish the labels or create label policy. As we have already discussed, if you have a sensitivity label which has been created, you have to publish that particular sensitivity label to be available to end users. And to do that, you have to create sensitivity label policy, or you have to publish that particular label. Moving ahead. These are certain commands, these are certain PowerShell commands which would be available to you when you are working with sensitivity labels. So in the left hand side, you can see all the commands which is available. On the right hand side, I have ran one command, that is get-label, to get the details of that particular label. When you run this command, you will get what is the action which is defined for that particular label. For example, in this example, you see the action is defined as encrypt. If there is any sort of conditions which is defined on that label, this particular parameter will show what is the condition which was applicable to this label. Tool tip, this is a tip which would be available to the end users while using this particular label. So for example, I have taken this as 1 day expire. Then it also defines the workload to which this label is being applied to. For example, we have applied this label to Exchange and SharePoint. So it also gives you information about the workload where this label has been applied. Disabled, whether this label is active or inactive. So disabled is value should be true or false based on the condition. Is valid, again, it should be true or false based on the condition and the name of the label. Moving ahead. All right, now let's talk about how we troubleshoot sensitivity labels issue. So whenever you are troubleshooting a sensitivity label issue, it is very important to isolate the issue. So to start with, we first check what is the user behavior. It is very important to understand to apply sensitivity label, user must be signed into Office with their work or school account. You need to validate what is the behavior in Outlook web app and what is the behavior in Outlook client. We also have to identify the client used, for example, unified labeling client, Azure information protection client, or built-in client. Identifying whether Azure sensitivity labels are used to Microsoft information protection sensitivity labels. So you also have to make sure whether Azure sensitivity labels are used or Microsoft information protection sensitivity labels are used, because both of them are different and their working and troubleshooting also is different. We can also perform bootstrapping. Bootstrapping is the process of reinitializing the client, deleting the registry entries, downloading the certificates, templates, label, and policy. Bootstrapping is mainly of two types: bootstrapping the RMS and bootstrapping the labels. And bootstrapping can be done using different methods. For example, you can do bootstrapping manually, that is, you can go ahead and delete the registries, you can delete the templates which is available, you can delete the labels which is available. You can also make use of the clients which is there, for example, unified labeling client or Azure information protection client, where you get the option of reset setting. This performs the same action. And you can also make use of RMS support tool with switch reset client to perform the same. We will talk about RMS support tool in upcoming slides. All right. Now, this is a screenshot from the path C drive users, the profile of the user, app data, local, Microsoft, MSIPC. Under MSIPC folder, if you see, these are the templates which would be available if you are using Azure Information Protection or Microsoft Information Protection. So all the templates which get downloaded, the location of these templates are here. On your right hand side, if you see, these are the certificates which would get downloaded, which is used for authentication purpose in your MIP service or AIP service or maybe RMS service. And if you go to the logs folder, these are the log file which is available. So you have to always check for the recent log, because this is a continue transaction which happens. So you have to make sure that you are looking for the recent log file, and you can analyze the log file and understand what is the cause of the problem or why sensitivity labels are not working. Okay. In a similar way, we also have a different log which is application specific or client specific, which is available in the same location, and the folder name is MSIP. When you go to MSIP folder, there is a folder called MIP. When you open that particular folder, it will give you the logs based on the specific client that you are using. So for in this instance, I'm using MIP client or unified client. That is where I see MIP-SDK MIP log. So we can make use of this particular log as well to troubleshoot the issue. Okay, now we'll talk about RMS support tool. So RMS support tool supports Microsoft Windows PowerShell 5.1 on the operating system like Windows 8.1, Windows 10, which is the recommended one, Windows Server 2012, Windows Server 2012 R2, Windows Server 2016, and Windows Server 2019. It also supports Microsoft Office client, Office 13, Office 16, Office 19, and Click to Run, which is available on Microsoft 365. To work with RMS support tool, first you have to install the modules. These are the 3 modules which needs to be installed for RMS support tool to work. First is Azure Information Protection. Second is Exchange Online Management, and the third one is AIP service. So these are the PowerShell command that you have to use to install these particular modules. Okay. All right, so the installation part, these are the steps that needs, or these are the PowerShell command that you have to follow to install the RMS support tool. So first you have to install the package provider NuGet. And once you install the package provider NuGet, you have to install the module PowerShell Get. And then once you are done with this, then you have to define or set the PS repository gallery as trusted repository. So there is a PowerShell command. These are all the PowerShell command that you have to run. Once the prerequisites are met, then you can finally run install module name RMS support tool. This will install the RMS support tool in your machine. Once this RMS support tool is installed on your machine, you can make use of these switches like record problem, collect logs, or compress log switches, which is available with RMS support tool to reproduce the issue and record the problem, collect the logs while reproducing the issue. And if the logs are too big, you can compress the log and send it across if it is required. Apart from that, you can also make use of RMS support tool, the switches which is available to get the AIP service configuration. If you are using Azure Information Protection, you can use switch collect-AIP service configuration to get the complete details about the AIP service that you are using. All the AIP protection templates which is available, so you can use collect-AIP protection template to get the template details, and collect-MSC label and policy. This will give you the MIP labels which is available. So these are the switches, some of the common switches which is available with RMS support tool, which you can make use of to collect the details about sensitivity labels and also to do a bootstrapping. Right. Moving on, now let's talk about eDiscovery. eDiscovery or electronic discovery is the process of identifying and delivering electronic information that can be used as a evidence in legal cases. So again, eDiscovery is also used for legal purposes. In using eDiscovery, you can define the content or you can search the content and you can put that content into hold based on the requirement. eDiscovery can also be used for different workloads like Teams, SharePoint, Exchange, OneDrive, and Skype, of course. Moving on. These are the permissions which is required for eDiscovery. So for example, compliance administrator can do a case management. Compliance administrator can do compliance search and he can do a hold or he can perform a hold for eDiscovery. However, he won't be able to do a export. eDiscovery manager and administrator would be able to perform all the actions which is available with eDiscovery, but he cannot do search and purge, meaning he cannot purge any content from a mailbox. An organization management role group can perform case management, compliance search, hold, and search and purge. However, a reviewer can only review the eDiscovery cases. Moving on. Here we have listed down the steps which is required to perform or create a eDiscovery cases. To start with, you have to assign permission to the potential case member. Once you assign permission to the potential case member, you create a new case, you add members to that particular case, place the content that you have searched into the location and put on hold if you need that. You can also run content search associated with that case. For example, if you're looking for a particular keyword or something, you can perform a content search. If you have sufficient permission, you can also export the result of the content search and which is associated with the case. These are some additional steps that you can perform, like closing a case, reopening a case, or delete a case. In this slide, we have talked about sometimes you might see there is a difference between the estimated result and the actual eDiscovery search result. This usually happens when in normal scenarios, like estimated search is just an estimate, while the download, when you are downloading the search result, it is actually downloading the data. So you might see some kind of differences between an estimated search result and the actual eDiscovery search result. Moving on. These are certain limits which apply to content search. OK, so I'll just take a quick pause here for 2 minutes for so that you can go through it. In case if you have, if you have any questions, we can answer that. So if we talk about the maximum number of mailboxes or site that can be searched in single content search, there is no limit to it. The maximum number of content search that can run at same time, there is no limit to it. The maximum number of content searches that a single user can start at a time is 10. Maximum number of item per user mailbox that are displayed on preview page is limited to 100. Maximum number of items found in all user mailbox that are displayed on preview page is limited to 1000. And similar way, we have other limitation applied. Moving on. So here we have defined the search eDiscovery activities that is captured in audit logs. So if you are performing an eDiscovery, what are the actions which is captured in audit logs? So creating and managing eDiscovery cases is captured in audit log. Creating, starting and editing content search. So if you are performing any sort of content search in eDiscovery, those will be captured in audit log. Performing content search actions such as previewing, exporting and deleting search result, which will also be captured in audit log. Configuring permission filtering for content search. If you are modifying any sort of content search, that will also be captured in auditing log. And again, managing any sort of administrative role, that will also be captured in audit log. These are certain PowerShell commands which is available for you to check the eDiscovery working or get the details of eDiscovery. For example, get-case hold policy, get-case hold rule, the compliance search that you have performed on that particular case, and the compliance search action, whatever action you have defined on that particular case. So if you do a get-case hold policy, the distribution status, as you can see, if it is success, that means your eDiscovery search has been completed and your action has been performed. So again, get-compliance case hold status. If you see the case hold status, you can also get the what is the status of the case hold. And in case hold policy, you can define what is the or you can get the details about the case hold policy. Moving on. So these are the roles which is required for search and delete, because it's a delete action. So there is a specific role which is required for a member to perform delete on any mailbox. So you have to be a member of organization management role group, or you should be assigned search and purge management role to be able to search and delete. A maximum number of 10 items per mailbox can be removed at one time. This is a limitation which get applied when you are performing search and delete. And this is the command which is available, that is new-compliance search, name of the search, the location, and content match query, which will be used to perform the compliance search. After you define or after you create the new compliance search, you have to start the compliance search to perform the search or initiate the search. And then you can perform the action of purge by using the purge switch. And you can also define whether it's a soft delete or a hard delete. Now we talk about exporting a eDiscovery content into your local database. So again, for this action also, you have to have a specific permission for export management role in your security and compliance center. The computer you use to export the search result has to meet the following system requirements. So if you are performing a eDiscovery search and you want to download the content, your machine on which you would be downloading the content needs to meet this particular criteria, that is 32-bit or 64-bit version of Windows 7 and later, or Microsoft .NET Framework 4.7. So if your machine do not meet this minimum requirement, you won't be able to download the content search. You have to use one of the following supported browser to run eDiscovery tool. Okay, now we also have a limitation where only these are the browsers which is supported for eDiscovery export. So Microsoft Edge and Microsoft Internet Explorer 10 and later version is supported for downloading the exported result or exporting the content search result. Moving on. All right, now let's get to some pointers. Search created on content search page aren't displayed on the search pages of an eDiscovery case in Security and Compliance Center. So if you are creating any content search, that wouldn't be displayed in search page. You can't export the result of multiple searches listed on content search page in Security and Compliance Center. So you cannot perform a download of multiple searches at the same time. There are certain file formats which are disabled from search. So these are certain file formats which will not be searched when you are performing a content search. Dynamic distribution group aren't supported. So if you are having any dynamic distribution group, those are not supported with eDiscovery search. The maximum number of keyword that a search query can accommodate is 500. You cannot exceed this. Right. So with this, we have came to an end of our presentation. I hope this session is helpful. Thank you very much for watching this video.